Holy cow, just talked to Scott DeLuzio, author of Surviving Son and the host of the Drive On podcast. Surviving Son is a compelling, true story that provides the reader with an insight into the life of a combat infantryman who fought in Afghanistan at the same time as his younger brother Steven, who was killed in action just miles away. I just finished the audiobook recently, read by Scott himself, which gives it that personal touch. And it's a story that was incredibly inspiring, touched my heart, and is something that I will never, ever forget. I also went the extra mile on survivingsonbook.com, where you can get a signed copy. Scott, this is going on my bookshelf at work. Scott's brother, Steven DeLuzio, died on August 22nd, 2010, fighting for his country. To honor Steven DeLuzio's legacy, we are going to release the interview that I had with Scott tonight on the Hero Front podcast on that anniversary. So that talk will come out this August 22nd in dedication to Steven. So what I love about Scott, his story, his book, and his podcast was that he took something that would break most people. Not only did he lose his brother, but he almost lost his own life while in Afghanistan. So his family actually almost lost both of their sons in that deployment. And although Scott has gone through some really hard times, he's completely transparent about it in his book in absolutely incredible detail, where you feel like you're just sitting right next to him on his journey, just rooting for him from the sidelines. But how Scott was able to take this tragedy and over the years use it as a platform for veterans, for mental health, to honor his brother's legacy, and to still be there for veterans and showing us that there is life after PTSD, that you can be happy. Go to survivingsonbook.com, get your copy, and you can look forward to my interview with Scott on August 22nd. Take care. What book are you reading today?
You know what? I actually just recently reread a book. I have it here somewhere. It's a book by, I believe, someone else who you know, is a Coast Guard veteran, Ashley Leppert. Her book, The Hurricane Within. She re-released it, and I was fortunate enough to be able to provide an endorsement for her on that book. And so she sent me a copy of that. I wanted to reread that book because it was just an incredible read. And so I just got done with that not too long ago. And I really highly recommend that book to anyone out there who's listening. It's really an incredible, eye-opening story into what the Coast Guard does in the various rescue operations that they do, natural disasters, boating accidents, things like that. They do so much that it's sort of behind the scenes and we don't really see it. And I know a lot of times in the military community, we give the Coast Guard a lot of crap, but they really do a lot of stuff for the people back home, and it's important work. So it's a great book. It's called The Hurricane Within. That I'd highly recommend that to anyone out there listening. Absolutely. So did you saw my picture with her? I did. Yeah, I saw that. That's why I had a feeling you knew who I was talking about. But yeah, she's incredible person. I've had her on the podcast a couple times now. Yes, I had a feeling you two had a kind of a similar ending in your books, where you both meet Donald Trump and you both are extremely motivated by that experience to kind of take it to the next level, take the message to the next level. So yeah, your ending really reminded me too of how her book closed out. But I got to go to Black Rifle Coffee and team with them and interview Ashley in person. I have all in-person stuff, and she lives here in Florida, so I got to hang out with her for an evening. So it was amazing. That episode comes out like end of this month, actually. So be on the lookout for that. There's a lot of really cool people here in Florida, a lot of veterans with really interesting stories. So I'm just going to keep on keeping on with the in-person ones. They're an absolute blast. And if I'm ever in Arizona, because there's a lot of TDYs out there, I'll make sure to bring my stuff so we can link up since you're so close to Luke. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And, we can record an episode in person. We can do all sorts of stuff. That would be great. So,
Absolutely. And then I did see your like your quote, like your thoughts on her book on the back of her book. And I was like, what?
yeah.
Holy cow. Like this is like right after like I linked up with you. So I was like, what are the chances I would just like see your name like right after that? Like
Yeah.
that really tripped me out.
One thing I've noticed in this podcasting and everything that we've been doing, over the last few years, is that the veteran community is really tight, and it's actually kind of a small world. As many people as there are in there, um, everyone starts to blend together, and they start to know each other, and these connections they form like a solid web, and we all just like kind of branch out, and we'll pull whoever in. Like I'll pull you into my network. I'll pull Ashley into my network, and we're gonna help each other out no matter what. And so, it's just a lot of good stuff going on. So yeah, it's a small world, but it's awesome.
That's what I love about it too. For one, podcasting, the community is already great. And then on top of that, veterans, my theory is we're always on the move. So we form relationships quickly. We're a bit more transparent than a civilian counterpart would, because we know that time is limited. So might as well just put it out there and get to know each other and have a good time. So I think that's what makes veterans good podcasters, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of these conversations that I've had on my podcast have been just real, maybe half hour, 45-minute conversations, real short, brief conversations. But at the end of the conversation, I feel like I've known the person for years.
Right.
And so it's pretty incredible.
It is. And I wanted to recommend this book to you just while I had your ear here. And it's called The Soldier's Guide to PTSD by Virginia Cruz.
Yes.
Do you know who that is?
I do. I've had her on my podcast as well.
Okay, you've already talked to her.
Yes, I have. But it's awesome. It's an incredible read, and I think it's a great book for people who are going through PTSD. I got some good insights for myself out of that book, just kind of secondary, because I was having her on the podcast. I wanted to read through the book, and I dealt with PTSD myself, and reading through that book helped me have a few light bulb moments, like, oh man, this is what I've been going through this whole time, and didn't even realize it, and this helped me out. So yeah, that's another great one for anyone out there struggling with PTSD.
Definitely. Yeah, she's incredible. All right, question number 2: if your book became a movie, and you could pick any actor for you and Steven, what would the 2 actors be?
Okay, so this question has come up before, and there's an app out there, and I forget what it's called now, but it's what celebrity do you look like? And you upload a picture of yourself or somebody else or whatever, and it pops out a celebrity. And so you were saying earlier how my voice sounds a whole lot older than I look.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, the people who it was spitting out for me were these like 75, 80-year-old people. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't catch a break here. Like, I'm not going to be having these 80-year-old guys playing me in a war movie or whatever, but all the guys who, like, I put my brother's picture in there. And granted,
it's like Tom Cruise, and you're like, what the?
Yeah. It was like these young, handsome looking guys. And I'm like, geez, man, I can't catch a break. So I don't know. I kind of gave up on the idea of a movie after that. So it's like, no one's gonna.
But if you could pick,
I could pick
literally any celebrity.
Oh gosh, man. Well, honestly, I don't know if it would matter so much who the person was. It would have to be someone who kind of fit my character, as far as my mannerisms, my personality, that type of thing, and who could at least play that role. And I don't know who that is, specifically, but I'd like that person to be able to capture like the actual emotions that we're going through during, the stuff that I talk about in the book, the combat scenes, the loss of my brother, the homecoming and all that kind of stuff. I'd like someone to actually be able to capture that. And I think that's probably a cop-out answer because I haven't actually given a name, but I have to think about that a little bit more
Yeah.
and come up with some names for that.
Okay. When you watch movies, I want you to just keep thinking about that.
I will.
And
I
get
will.
back to me. Just shoot me a message. Okay. Third question. What is a quote that you live by?
Oh man. So this is something I say to my kids all the time. And it's something I got from the military. It's the slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I have to remind myself of that all the time. And the reason why, and my kids as well, the reason why is because sometimes we just try to rush through things to just knock it out, get it done or whatever. But then when you do that, you end up making mistakes. You get sloppy, you don't do things the right way, and you end up having to go back, do it over again. Ends up taking you twice as long or even longer than it would have taken you to begin with if you just kind of slowed down and did it the right way the first time. And I tell this to my kids with their schoolwork, with different chores that they're doing, because when they go up to their rooms and they said they oh yeah, I cleaned my room, and they did a half-assed job, and then they come back downstairs hoping to be able to watch some TV or go play outside or whatever, and we go in the room and it's still a disaster. It's like, well, no, you didn't do this. If you just slowed down, did it the right way the first time, you wouldn't be back up here cleaning it now the second time. And you'd be able to go out and play with your friends or do whatever it is that you wanted to do that was making you rush through this so quickly. So, that's something that I've, from the first time I heard it, it just kind of clicked with me and it made sense. And I just absolutely love that saying.
Definitely. And I I actually just heard it not too long ago. A few months ago, I went to Camp Bullis, which it's an army base. So you may have heard of it. It's in San Antonio, kind of in the middle of nowhere where they can just blow stuff up. And that's where the combat medic schools are. And so my job is public health. So here it's like audiograms, food inspections, deployment, in processing and out processing, COVID ops, disease stuff, mosquito trapping. And in a deployed environment, a lot of that's, outside the wire. Our job is actually kind of dangerous outside the wire. So I had to go to this school and it was an absolute blast. But there's a lot of like reenactments there to like save people. And they, they're screaming at you, making all these noises and explosions are going off. And, you have tourniquets and things like that. And they use that quote over and over again. And that's how they want your head to be as you try to save someone with a tourniquet while complete chaos is going on around you. Cause you only have that one, shot to get it on there right and to potentially save that person's life. So it's funny that you said that quote because it was literally repeating in my head over and over as I was trying to like keep my cool while these people were screaming in my face.
Yeah. And that's the thing is if you can just slow down and think about what you're doing with a clear mind, block out all that other crap, the screaming, the explosions, the noise, the distractions. That's really what they are. They're distractions. They're trying to distract you in a course like that. They want you to learn how to work through those distractions and just get over it. And if you can do that, if you can just focus on the task at hand, putting that tourniquet on, whatever it is that you're trying to do, right?
Pulling them out you got to pull them out after that. So yeah.
If you can just focus on that, slow down, do what you're supposed to do, make sure it's on tight. So that way, when you're pulling the person out of there, it doesn't slip loose or anything like that, right? You focus on the thing that you're supposed to do. None of that other noise matters. That's just something else that's going on. Just focus on the here and now, this thing that's going on right now. And that's how you get the job done.
Definitely. And you've been to training before. You're like, come on, what are we doing? But this training, I was like, I actually felt prepared. Like by the end of that course, I was like, I can do this. So they're really doing a great job out there. Good. And then, so I asked the 3 questions, but I like to ask veterans this specific question at the as a bonus question. What is your proudest Army moment?
Um, wow, that's a tough one. I think for me, uh, just being able to serve my country, deploying to Afghanistan. I joined after 9/11. I knew we were at war. I joined as an infantryman. I knew at some point I was probably going to be deployed, and I wanted that. At some point, I wanted to go overseas and deploy to support my country. And when I had that ability to do that, and I went to Afghanistan and was able to fight for our country, that to me was like one of the proudest things that I could have done, because it meant a lot to be able to give back to the country that's given me so much, so many opportunities, so many different um, freedoms and things like that. I felt like that need to give back was there, and it meant a lot to me to be able to go off and serve that way.
Definitely. And, props to you and your brother, because I mean, y'all were extremely talented, driven, smart individuals. Like you could have been officers if you wanted. You know what I mean? Like the purpose meant more to you than your own career, your own finances, your own plan. The purpose of serving and doing what you thought was right and honorable over all other things, I thought that was incredible. Because like I've met a lot of great airmen. Obviously, I've met a lot of selfish ones too. That can be a bit disheartening. So you and your brother, I mean, in all honesty, were overqualified. If I'm being honest,
Sure.
you're not the average person that's joining. You're much above average with your credentials, your school, but you still, took that job wanting to serve your country in the best way you could. And I was just absolutely blown away by that service before self. I really, that truly touched my heart.
Yeah, and honestly, when I joined, it was so my brother joined first, and he enlisted. He was still in college when he joined, and so he enlisted. And a short time after he joined, I heard this report in the news that the military was struggling to meet their recruiting numbers. They needed, the ground troops, the infantry, the combat arms type folks. And when I heard that they're struggling to meet their recruiting numbers, this was now maybe 3 or 4 years after 9/11. It started to piss me off. I was like, where are all these people who, during 9/11, they were ready to move mountains to go kick some ass and fight, get some payback, right? And I was like, where are all these people? And then I realized that I was one of those people that at that time I wanted to do something. And then now 3 or 4 years later, I still hadn't done anything for serving my country or anything like that. So I was like, you know what? I'm young enough, I'm fit enough, I'm perfectly capable. So why not me? Why don't I join this way? And the one thing I didn't want to do is have my service in any way um, outshine my brothers. I didn't want to join as an officer and outrank him and make him feel like he was, this big when I'm, the bigger, more higher ranking brother or anything like that. I didn't want that for him. And so I decided to enlist. And he was enlisted with my college degree. I started off as an E4. He was an E4 by the time I graduated basic training. So basically our entire military career, we stayed at just about the same rank all the way throughout. So, it just worked out that way. But I never really wanted to outrank him anyway. So just so happened when he got his E5, it was right around the same time. I think maybe within a month or so, I got mine, and it just happened to work out that way. So yeah, no, I appreciate what you said about that, but it was it's really not about the rank. For me, I didn't care how high of a rank I got. I didn't care how much money I made. I mean, I was a National Guard soldier, so I wasn't really doing it for the money. You do 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. It's it's a little bit extra. It's like gas money for the month.
Right.
Although these days gas money is, a pretty big deal, but
Right.
but
Yeah.
back then it was not quite as big a deal as it is now. But anyways, it was not about any of that. It was really about serving, and that's was the most important thing for me.
And so if I'm remembering right, Steven was your younger brother, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
But he joined before you joined, so you're the older brother joining after him.
Yeah.
How was that dynamic? Like, how was he someone, like, did you have one of those mutual relationships where although you were the older brother, you both looked up to each other in a way?
Well, it's kind of funny. So we both were raised in a very patriotic family. We grew up respecting the military and first responders, police, fire, EMS, all those people, because we know that everyone who puts a uniform on, no matter what the uniform is, they're doing something bigger than themselves. They're serving their community, they're serving their country, and willing to sacrifice a part of themselves or the entire part of themselves for other people. And so we always had that respect for the military, especially. And growing up, I was always the older brother, the one who, when we would roughhouse, I usually would beat up my brother when he was little. I remember I used to do this thing where we'd get into a little scuffle, and I'd bend over like at the waist, and he'd jump on my back, but he was light enough that I was able to, and he'd kind of like bear hug me around my neck or whatever. And he was light enough, I was able to stand up and just kind of like run backwards into a wall. And he never really got that through his head that I don't do that anymore, because he's gonna do this to me.
Right.
But I would do that all the time. It was like my signature move if I was a wrestler or something, just like
Right.
knock him into a wall. And so we always had that kind of dynamic growing up. We would fight like any siblings do, but we did respect each other. But when he joined, it was like a flip of the switch, because I all of a sudden started looking up to him the way I always looked up to the military and police officers and things like that growing up. I always looked up to those people. Now all of a sudden he was one of those people. And I was like, holy crap, I am super proud of him for making this decision. I'm so like in awe of him for doing this. And so, when he went through basic training, he started going to his drills and everything like that, the training that he had to do. I started to learn a little bit about what it meant to be in the military and the National Guard in particular, because that's where he joined. And so I knew a little bit about that just through talking to him, hearing his stories, and I got to learn about what it would be like. And when it came time for me to decide whether or not I wanted to join the military, I said, well, if he could do it, there's no way I'm gonna let him one up me. I'm gonna be able to do it too. So but it was really a proud moment when he joined for me. It was one of those things where I probably got annoying talking to my coworkers or other people, just because I was just talking about it all the time. How he joined and how proud of him I was and everything like that. So it was interesting, but it was a cool thing to happen that way.
Yeah, I love that you looked up to your little brother. Like, it was such an honorable thing in your mind. Like I saw that. I as I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, he's like it was like he came back a different person.
Yeah.
He had this like aura about him almost, and you had this direct insight to the Army. You could ask all the questions you want, and then you also got to see the before and after.
Mm-hmm.
You saw before he left, and you saw when he was getting back from training. But
cool.
Scott, I was hoping that, we know that you and your brother, you joined, you were both incredible patriots to begin with. You both joined, you both went through all the training, and you both went to Afghanistan. And then one of your chapters is just straight up the date, August 22nd, 2010. And I was hoping you could run us through that day.
Yeah, sure. So that day for me started off basically on top of a mountain in Afghanistan. We flew out late the night before, under the cover of darkness. We were on Chinooks, and we landed on top of this mountain. Our mission was to go down into this village once when daylight broke. We were doing a joint mission with the Afghan army, and we were going through to look for various Taliban activity. They had suspected that someone had stolen some Afghan army uniforms, so we're going through to look for things like that, weapons, other maybe bomb making materials, things like that in this village. But we had to wait for first light because the Afghan army at the time didn't have any night vision capabilities. So, going down a jagged mountainside in Afghanistan in the middle of the night, pitch black, would be dangerous, if not impossible, for some of them to do without the night vision. So, so we waited and went down. We conducted our mission through this village, found a few things, some uniforms, which we burned on the spot. We found a few weapons, not much. And we had an EOD guy there who strapped some explosives to them, blew them up, and those things became pretty much useless. And the mission went off, exactly as we planned, which is kind of strange. When you're dealing with a joint operation like that, especially with the Afghan army, you never know what you're going to get, because the level of training that they have is varied and usually not all that good. So we were actually pretty fortunate that it went off pretty well for us. And as we were kind of wrapping up in the village, we were heading back up the mountain. I got a call on the radio saying that the commanding officer was looking for me. And again, I was just an E5 at the time. And so the commanding officer looking for me, it was like, okay, I either did something really incredibly good or I screwed something up royally. Like this
either way,
that's anxiety fuel.
Huge. Yeah, big time. And I was thinking through the day, and I was like, okay, I didn't do anything that great. Like, I'm not getting any medals today for the work that I did. So, yeah, I couldn't think of any of the good things. So my head was just going to all the bad things. And so I work my way back up the mountain, and I link up with the commanding officer, and he tells me to go off to the side, kind of away from everybody else. There were some trees and some rocks and stuff that kind of separated us from the rest of the group. And he told me to take a knee, and he had some stuff that he needed to tell me. And so I'm like, okay, well, I didn't screw up because he would have been chewing me out already. So it had to be something else bad. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe I got a Red Cross message from back home, maybe a family member passed away or something like that. I didn't know what had happened, but my mind started going that direction. But he told me that my brother's unit had been ambushed and that he had gotten hit in that ambush. And up until that point, I never even considered the fact that my brother could be injured or killed in action or anything like that.
It's almost like that was like not even a possibility in your brain. Like, y'all were both there to do a mission. Y'all are both going to get back. And there was no other, your mind couldn't even see that other possibility.
No, it couldn't. Honestly, I think to me, that possibility was just something that you hear about other people, happening to other people. You hear about it in the news when there's a fallen soldier or something. That's somebody else. That's not me. That's not my family. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. That I didn't even comprehend that that's something that could happen. And so I started thinking logistics, like going into big brother mode. Like, how do I help him? How do I, even if it's nothing more than just being there for moral support, how do I get to him? If he needs blood or something like that, like, I can donate some blood to him. I can, do whatever I can do to help him out. But the commanding officer, he looked at me, a little strange, and he was like, I don't think you quite understand what I'm telling you, that he's been killed. And that was like a punch in the gut. It just sucked the air right out of me. It was like, man, it was like the worst possible news that he could have told me at that point. And it took me a while to actually just grasp what he was saying, because that was such a non-existent possibility in my mind that it just to me, it didn't even make sense that my brother wouldn't be here, that he was gone.
Yeah, like you never ever pictured or saw a world that he didn't live in.
That's exactly right. And he was engaged to be married about a year after he was killed. He had a wedding date planned already, and he was an uncle to my son, my firstborn son. He was a godfather to him as well, and it was just like, that's just what life is going to have for us. Like, he's going to come home, he's going to get married, he's going to continue his life, he's going to build a family, have kids of his own, he's going to go back to his career and everything. He's like, that's just what's going to happen. And now I'm having to wrap my head around the fact that no, none of this is going to happen. He's not coming home. He's not going to get married. He's not going to be there. My kids will never get to know him, other than through stories and things like that, but they'll never get to spend time with him and stuff. And that just blew me away. It just was such a terrible thing to think about. And so when I found out about this, I was obviously in a pretty bad place mentally. I was sad. I was grieving. I also was carrying a loaded rifle, and so my commanding officer naturally was very concerned that I might hurt myself or others or something like that. So he had a couple other soldiers come and sit with me to just make sure that I was okay, and that I wasn't going to lose it or whatever, and kill myself or somebody else or whatever, that that the grief and the anger wouldn't overcome and cause me to do something stupid like that. So about 20 minutes after finding out that my brother was killed, our own unit started taking fire from the village that we just came out of. Obviously, the Afghan army didn't do a great job searching the village for weapons and Taliban fighters and things like that. So we ended up in a firefight. And so now, not only am I grieving the loss of my brother, I'm now having to wrap my head around leading my squad and fighting back against this attack.
That part was so brutal to read.
Yeah.
Because it was like, you just are at probably the lowest moment of your life.
Yeah.
You can't even comprehend the news that you've been told. Your mind is racing with thoughts. And before you can even come to terms with it, these people are trying to kill you. It's just like, it's just absolutely brutal situation. Like when you got to that part, I stopped. I was running when I was listening to this part. I stopped running because I was like, I can't believe that at that point there's people actively trying to now kill him. Like, it was crazy. So what was going through your mind then? Where did you feel anger? Did you feel nothing? Did you feel out of it? Like, because that's two very extreme situations that just happened to you back to back.
Yeah. So I felt extreme anger. Like, when I'm talking extreme, it was like to the point of almost being homicidal, where I just wanted to kill as many of these people as I could. I was so angry at Afghans in general for not being able to take care of their country. And I say this now, all these years later, I don't hold any ill will against the people of Afghanistan or, anyone like that. The people who are responsible for my brother's death are not here for me to be mad about anymore anyways. So there's no point in holding any kind of resentment or anything. But at the time, I felt so much anger, and I wanted to take out revenge against anybody that I could, whether they had anything to do with it or not. I was extremely angry at the whole situation, at the whole war in Afghanistan, that the people who lived there couldn't take care of their own country and required people like us and like my brother to come there and give his life for what was going on there, and just the anger build up inside of me. But I knew that if I let that anger take over and take control of me, that I would end up snapping and doing something stupid, and it would very likely get myself seriously injured or killed as well. And I knew that I couldn't do that to my parents. They just lost a son earlier that day. Actually, at that point, they didn't even know that they lost a son. I couldn't possibly let them get a second knock on the door or get a knock on the door informing them that both of their sons were killed. That just was not a possibility as far as I was concerned. So I knew I had to keep it together. But also for my wife and my son, I didn't want my wife to become a widow or my son to grow up without a father. And also the guys that I was leading, the squad that I had in front of me, I didn't want them to get injured or killed because I did something stupid. And how would I be able to tell their families that their loved one wasn't coming home because I was an idiot and I went off and I let my emotions get the better of me? That I couldn't do that either. So I said the best way for me to deal with this right now is to put all my personal stuff behind me, swallow it down, kind of compartmentalize this stuff and say, it's not that I'm not going to deal with the grief and the sadness. I'm just not going to deal with it right now. And I box it up, I put it on a shelf, obviously metaphorical shelf. And I said, I just need to focus on the mission here. And we need to stop this attack. We need to fight back and do whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that our guys get home safe. And that's exactly what we did. Fortunately, during that attack, no Americans were killed in action. There were a few injuries, but they were more like rolled ankles and things like that from just the uneven terrain and whatnot. So we were very fortunate in that attack that no Americans were killed or seriously injured in that. So shortly after that attack, I was flown out from that village and flown out to Bagram Air Base, and that's where basically I started my journey home. But that day, I think to this day still goes down as the absolute worst day in my life. And I've had good days, I've had bad days, but nothing compares to that day. And the loss of my brother in that way was just so incredibly devastating. Not only the fact that I was, thousands of miles away from home, but also because I couldn't really talk to anybody back home after finding out for quite a while because we had to wait to make sure that my parents had been notified through the formal process that that quote unquote knock at the door where they come and they give that formal notification that someone has been killed in action. And so when I got to Bagram, I wanted to call home. I wanted to talk to my parents, but they wouldn't allow me to because they quite frankly didn't know whether or not my parents had been notified at that point. And just based on the time difference, there really was no way of finding out whether or not my parents had been notified. So, it was incredibly isolated and lonely. There were other soldiers around me at that time. There were, chaplains and mental health professionals who met with me. I met with the brigade leadership, and they were all great people to talk to and everything. But, I didn't really know any of them. I wasn't friends with any of them at that point. And it was just a very lonely feeling for me. I had nobody in the world to talk to,
That's the worst feeling, when you're surrounded by people, but never felt so alone due to the situation. No one can relate with you. You don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And all you want to do is see a familiar face, a family member, a friend. And it's a very debilitating feeling. And I felt helpless, for you. Because you probably spent a lot of your childhood protecting your brother. So there's also this sense of he was taken from you. It's like this helplessness. I couldn't protect them. It broke my heart. It really did. Reading that, I'm very proud of Steven, and I'm proud of you too, Scott. You two are heroes, and I'm just thankful that you're here to carry on his legacy, tell his story. and just be there for him, for your family, and for veterans.
Yeah, and honestly, that's part of why I wanted to write this book, and I talk about it in the book. Part of my reasoning for writing the book, but one of the big things for me is that when his body was brought home, and when I got home, there was, I'll just call it a media circus. There were people all over the place, and I was in no mood to talk to anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. But there's a public affairs officer from the Army who met us at my parents' house and said, it's completely all right to not talk to the media if we don't want to. You can go tell them to get lost, and they'll go run a story, but it's not going to be, that story that talks about who my brother was. And that's when it really drove home, and it made me realize that this isn't about me and my feelings about telling this story. It's about him. He's no longer here to tell his story, obviously. And so if I want somebody to know who he was, what kind of sacrifice was made, that type of thing, it kind of falls on me. I kind of have to tell the story. So as much as it is my story in the book, Surviving Son, it's also his story. And by writing it in a book format, it's one of those things that will outlive both of us, and it will be here for years and years to come. So hopefully people will be able to learn something from the experiences that we've had.
Definitely. I think it's always inspiring to see someone take tragedy and turn it into purpose and inspire others and let people know they're not alone. So yeah, I think it's beautiful what you've done with the story and with the legacy. Because a lot of sometimes PTSD, gets the best of us, and we become a shell of a person, and we become hermits, and we don't want to come out and talk to anyone. And sometimes it's even worse than that, and we lose members to suicide. So to see someone like you take the tragedy and use it to be there for others, I think is beautiful.
Yeah, and one of the things that I try to do is live in a way that if my brother Steven, if he was able to look down on us and see what's happening present day, I try to live my life in a way that he would be proud of. And I'm not perfect. Nobody is. I make mistakes. I do the wrong thing. I say the wrong thing. That happens all the time. But as long as we're doing things with a good heart, and that we're honest and open about the struggles that we're going through, and we can work through those things as opposed to just stuffing them down and letting them eat us up inside, I think he'll be able to look down and be proud of the things that we're doing. And that's really what I try to do every day. Definitely.
And I went through a time in my life where I was very down, drinking way too much, just really just not doing good. So I've been there, and I know you've been there. And there were so many times where like you weren't proud of yourself, and you mentioned that, like being that angry at not just the enemy, in Afghanistan, but the Afghans themselves, the country, that this war stole your brother when he was just trying to help them. That frustration, it manifested in many different ways. And it came out in some ugly ways sometimes, and you always regretted it. And I think it's so hard when you've seen kind of the evil of humanity and how bad it really can get. It's really hard to see the world the same way that you used to. It's almost like there's no going back, once you've seen that side. And so my question to you and anyone listening is, when you have that really challenging, that really negative outlook because you've seen the worst in humanity, when you feel like a shell of a person, like what were some of the first steps that you took to kind of get out of that headspace?
Yeah. And I dealt with some similar things to what you were talking about. I drank too much. I wasn't sleeping enough. I was irritated. I was angry. I carried that anger with me. I would get set off on the littlest of things, small things like my, toddler son who would make a mess or something like that. That's what kids do. Like that's just a normal thing that happens. And I'd flip out. I'd start screaming and yelling and just all these little minor inconveniences in the grand scheme of things I'd be flipping out about. And I realized one day that this is not the kind of person I want to be. It's not the kind of husband I want to be. It's not the kind of father I want to be. It's not the kind of coworker or neighbor or whatever title I had. It's not who I want to be. And so I decided I need to talk to somebody. I need to get help because clearly whatever it is that I'm doing is not working. It's just not. And so I went to the vet center and I met a great counselor there, and we talked through some of the issues, and he gave me some good advice, good guidance to help me get through some of this hard time in my life. And without that, I don't know that I would have been able to overcome these things on my own. I think I would have just done the same thing over and over again, not realizing just how detrimental it was to myself. And so through these conversations that I had with this objective third-party person, was able to help me see how the stuff that I was doing wasn't helpful. It wasn't moving me in the right direction. If anything, it was moving me in the wrong direction, and it was making things worse for me, for my family, for basically everything in my life. It was just making things worse. And so, for me, the very first thing that I did was just admitting that this is not the type of person I want to be, and I need help to fix that, to get to the point where I am a better person and I am the type of person that I would like to be, that I could be proud of being. And also realizing that it's okay to be a work in progress. I am not ashamed to admit that even now, about 12 years after getting back from Afghanistan, I still go to counseling for my PTSD and other issues that I've been going through. I am a work in progress. I'm not perfect. Like I said before, nobody is. And all I could do is just continue to strive towards a better version of myself, knowing that I'll never hit that perfect status, but that's okay.
Definitely. You hit a bunch of lessons in there, not chasing perfection, having that high expectation of ourselves, understanding that we're human, understanding that, what you went through was real, and that it's okay to ask for help. And there's power in that. There's power in sharing your story, being able to articulate it, think through it, and really open your heart to someone trying to help you. So it's almost like we want to hide it and bottle it down, but it's going to come out in one way or another. And so it's just more empowering and more healthy to choose the way in which it comes out.
Yeah.
Like with you, it was therapy and also art, so the art helped change you. I love that, how you got into drawing and painting. Are those is that your art in the background?
It is. Yeah. So the stuff over my shoulder here, those are mine. I have a few other things over here that are not necessarily mine, but they're stuff that have been sent to me as gifts and whatnot. So, but yeah, the four that you see over on this wall over my shoulder are mine. And it's one of those things for me where when I'm painting something, I just sort of get lost in what I'm doing. Like you hear about people talking about different grounding techniques and getting you to focus on the present moment. And when I'm painting, I find that I am, or any sort of artwork that I'm doing, I find that I'm just lost in the moment, and I'm just so focused on the here and now that none of the other problems in the world really seem to bother me. It's almost like I'm in a different world, like another dimension where the only thing that matters is what's going on the piece of paper or the canvas or whatever that I'm working on. And actually a little while ago, I was doing just some painting with my kids, and after we were done, my wife looked at me and she goes, you actually seem like you were really happy while you're doing that. And I was like, you know what? I actually was happy while I was doing that. And it was an enjoyable time. And so, for her to say that to me, it was eye opening in that, well, am I not happy more often? And if not, why not? And so, it's just finding those little things that bring a little bit of joy and happiness into your life. Being, it's even a bonus if you can share those with other people who you care about. Like in my case, my kids or other people in my family. I want to share those things with them and make positive memories that we can cling on to later on in life.
Definitely. That's beautiful. And I love the art. I love there's like a ribbon as the background there with the soldier, on the hill. That's wow. Really cool stuff, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so I hear my kids hollering down there. So I think we're about out of time. You probably know the feeling when you're doing a podcast and you just hear the kids just going nuts and you're like, oh, yeah. Podcasting and being a dad to toddlers, it's that's resiliency right there. Holy cow.
Is resiliency. Yeah. If you can do that, you can do just about anything.
Right. That's what prepped me for that combat medic school. Okay.
There you go.
All right, Scott. So love the book. Book is called Surviving Son. Absolutely blown away by this book, Scott. Blown away by your character, your transparency, in the story of your brother's bravery in protecting his soldiers, protecting this country, and what he was willing to do to protect us. And so I just want to thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us. I know it's hard to talk about it, but I also know it's honoring your brother in doing that. So thank you. So we're gonna end, Scott, with 3 questions here, and these are a little bit more personal.
Okay.
All right. So question 1, when you returned from your deployment, what did you think was more different, you or the world around you?
At first I thought it was the world around me. I found it very difficult to relate to other people, the civilians that I'd interact with at the store or coworkers, things like that. It just was different. And for some reason, I thought that everyone else had changed and that I was still the same person. Years later, hindsight is 2020. And so when I look back at things, I realized that it wasn't everyone else who changed. Obviously everyone changes a little bit, but I was the one who experienced such a dramatic change, and I just didn't see it at the time. But at the time, it was definitely me thinking that everyone else had changed.
Isn't it funny how that happens?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize that you changed that much to where you don't even see the world the same anymore. I mean, that is an eye-opening moment.
It is.
All right. So question number 2, I read the book and I listened to the audiobook, both fantastic. My question about the audiobook, I felt like speaking the book would have to be hard to do, right? Because you're trying to sound professional, you're trying to articulate well, but you're also reading out loud things that were already hard enough to just write down on paper. So my question is, out of your audiobook, was there a section that you really struggled to get through verbally to make that recording, not sound like it was emotionally getting to you?
Yeah, it was somewhere between chapter 1 and chapter 10 that I was having the most trouble with. Because I realized as I was recording just how terrible of a reader I am. And I was reading, so the way I had it set up, I had the like a PDF version of the book on my computer screen, and I had this microphone set up that I have here, and I was just reading off of the screen. And for whatever reason, my brain was just interpreting words differently, and I'd realized I was reading it, and I just suck at reading things out loud. It just is not something that I'm all that good at. So I had to do so many retakes and re-recordings of everything. But the hardest part for me was honestly the part that we talked about earlier, the day that my brother was killed. And we didn't get into it so much in this episode here, but I do talk about it in the book, where I actually go through the mission that he was on and what took place that day. And where I got all of that information was I was able to get the sworn statements from the soldiers who were on that mission about what had taken place. And I was able to kind of compile all of that together and piece it all together to figure out a timeline of events and what had actually taken place. So when I started reading that, that was the most difficult, because that was like, it was like actually being there, even though I never actually was there on that particular mission. It felt like I was there, and it was really hard for me to read that particular section.
Definitely. Okay. There were a few parts where I could tell it was harder to read, but to be honest, I really liked hearing it from you, with your voice.
Mm-hmm.
It really, I don't know. There was just something different about it. There really was. Like, even the part, it felt like I was there with you, you know, and there are certain parts that I could tell were hard for you to read. And it made that connection to your story that much more powerful, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And for the people who might be authors themselves or might be interested in doing an audiobook, I would definitely recommend doing it yourself as the author, especially if it's a biographical type of a book where you're talking about your own life and your own experiences and stuff, because it just has that much more personal connection to it. And you can, I've noticed, you can actually feel the emotion from the author just in the tone of their voice and everything like that. So I just prefer it that way when I listen to audiobooks. You know, I know that they're not going to be as clean and polished as a professional voiceover type person, but honestly, I think it comes off better with that kind of unpolished sound to it.
Absolutely. You did a fantastic job.
Appreciate that.
All right. So last question here, Scott. At what point did you feel your brother's spirit with you, felt him with you the most? What moment did that happen?
You know, this is actually a strange moment that took place. And it was the night, so the few hours after he had been killed that night, I was in the shower at Bagram Air Base, and I was all alone. There's no one else in the room with me. And I remember just leaning my head against the wall, pounding my hand on the wall of the shower, and just yelling out, "Why, Steven, why?" And it wasn't like I was talking to him, like I was expecting a response or anything like that. But I think I was actually calling out to God, asking God, "Why would you take him? Why, Steven? Why now?" He was 25 years old. You couldn't have given him a little more time. Like I was having it out with God in that moment, I think. And I was just trying to wrap my head around it. But I felt very shortly after this incident, I felt this strange calm come over me. And it made me realize that no matter what the response was, even if God himself came down and stood next to me in that shower and said, "Hey, here's my reasons," I don't think any of it would have been something that I would have been okay with, right? Like losing my brother, it's like, that's not going to be okay. But I knew that something positive was going to come from this. I know that as a Christian, I know that God's plan is good, and it's gonna have a good outcome. And yes, sometimes bad things happen to good people, but good things will come of it if we let them. And so it was just this strange, calm feeling that I had in that moment, where I was like, okay, things are going to be okay. They're not okay now, but at some point they're going to be okay. And I just have to have faith and know that that they will get better. So it was, I think, in that moment that things just kind of clicked in me and said, okay, things are going to be okay. You know, I did waffle back and forth where I had my moments where I kind of forgot about that. And I wasn't okay, and I didn't have that calmness about me anymore. But it's something I still think back to, and that I've never had a feeling like this come over me at
So it was
any
almost
point
like
in
a
my life.
spiritual feeling. It was powerful.
For sure, it was very powerful.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. And I do remember that part in the book. And yeah, it was just, yeah, what an incredible, it was almost like you emotionally just let it all out. And then, spiritually, it was just like he kind of, had his arm around you in a sense,
Yeah.
Wow. Holy cow. Okay. Well, you got through the questions. Those are the ones that, came to my mind as I was reading and listening to your book that I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
So Scott, I just want to tell you, you're an amazing author. You're an amazing podcaster, and you're an incredible husband, father, brother, veteran. You're just such an inspirational guy who is showing us that there is life after tragedy, and you're doing it in a way that honors your brother Steven's legacy forever. And I just want to thank you for being you, for putting your story out there and giving us that hope and encouragement that there is more to life, even after hitting one of the lowest points ever. So thank you so much, Scott.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you and your audience.
Absolutely. And I'd like to end with any final thoughts you have and any way that folks can connect with you and find your book.
Yeah, sure. So final thoughts. I just like to kind of piggyback off of what you were just saying there. Anyone who's out there struggling with whatever it is that they're struggling with in life, whether it's a loss of a loved one, a rocky marriage, whatever it is you're going through, at this point, you have survived 100% of the bad days that you've had in your life, and you'll continue to survive those days going forward. So don't give up. Don't quit on yourself. Don't quit on your family. Don't quit on the people around you. Keep on going through whatever it is you're going through, and things do get better. You just have to let them get better. So that's kind of my kind of closing thought. As far as connecting, my podcast, the Drive On Podcast, you can find at driveonpodcast.com, or on any place where you listen to the podcast. Just search for Drive On Podcast. You should be able to find it there. And the book, so again, Surviving Son, is available on Amazon in pretty much any format you could think of. The ebook, the Kindle version, the paperback, hardcover, and now the audiobook, like you mentioned, are all available there on Amazon. And if anyone wants a signed copy of the book, you can go to survivingsonbook.com, and I'd be happy to send a signed copy to anyone who wants one. So thanks again, Josh, for having me on and letting me share my story with you and the audience.